So you want to main Pele, the goddess of fire, of dance and wind, of volcanoes and violence. Yeah, she's a goddess of a lot of things. First, ask yourself, why do you want to main Pele? She has high single target damage. You can play her as a bruiser or an assassin. Pele has a high AoE damage for an assassin. She's super fun and fast. Now let's quickly get into the cons of Pele. It's important for you to know what Pele lacks in. As an assassin, her engagements are wonky. Pele does not have a traditional engagement ability. I will go more into this later. In this guide, we're going to explore Pele as a jungler with abilities, combos, builds, counters, and what not to do's. Pele is a Polynesian assassin in SMITE. SMITE has classified her as an average god. In my opinion, I find that she's hard. Let's get into Pele's abilities. After testing through her abilities, Pele has a pretty unique kit. In this case, I honestly feel that she can be played both as an assassin or a bruiser. Pele's passive, Everlasting Flame. When Pele drops below 50% health, she gains increased physical power, lifesteal, and ability lifesteal. This passive has a 20-second cooldown. This passive is activated for 6 seconds. This passive is great for 1v1ing other enemy gods as you will have an upper hand due to your passive. I honestly feel that her passive is pretty strong as she has an insane amount of lifesteal, gaining lifesteal from both her basic attacks and her abilities. Pele's first ability, Pyroclast. Pele's 1 is a projectile ability type. Pele fires out a magna orb ahead of her in a line. At maximum distance, it hovers briefly, solidifies, and returns back in pieces, dealing damage to enemies on the way back. The higher the rank of this ability, the more the number of shards increased. This ability is really cool and quite unique, as she has shards that return to her. As long as you stay behind her on the enemy, it will hit the enemy. Pele's second ability, Eruption. Pele's 2 is an area ability type. Pele explodes energy in an area around her, causing damage and knock-up to all enemies in radius. At level 3 and 5, the area expands at a delay, dealing less damage and a smaller knockup. I will show the differences here. Pele's 2 adds nice setup, AoE damage, and CC for both her combos and her allies. Pele's third ability, Magma Rush. Pele's 3 is an area damage and buff type. This ability uses fuel, which you will see on the left side here. In a small radius around her, she does tick damage, kind of like a mini mystical male. Pele has constant movement speed when the ability is activated. Toggling this ability again will expend more fuel, which will increase her damage and movement speed. There is no cooldown for this ability as it uses fuel. This ability would fall both under Pele's main escape and engagement ability. As it does area damage around you as well, it's nice to pop while dishing out damage to enemies when close range. Just make sure you have enough fuel to get out of bad situations. Pele's ultimate, Volcanic Lightning. Pele's ultimate is a dash and buff type. Pele dashes forward, dealing massive damage and a slow to the first enemy god hit. Pele will also deal additional damage to enemies behind in a cone. For the next 10 seconds or 3 basic attacks, she instead deals ability damage in a cone originating from that enemy. This ability can be used as escape or engagement for Pele. As it does have after effects as well, it doesn't always have to be an ultimate used to finish off enemies. I actually love this ability for teamfights. Now for the leveling order. This is a bit complicated. Pele has different playstyles, but personally for me, I find that you should have 2 points into your 3 as soon as you can. Playing Pele as a jungler, I find she prioritizes her abilities as follows. 3 for clear and damage. You can really stick onto enemies with this too. 2 for ganking and AoE radius increase. 1 for direct damage and clearing lanes. I would like to note if you're playing Pele as a lane god like mid, ADC, etc., then I would prioritize this ability over her too. And lastly 4. Most of the time this is used as an escape, or it can be used as an engagement as she has the basic attack buff on it, but in my playstyle, I would rather use Blink. So basically 3, 2, 1, 4. Remember, you want to at least put 2 points into her 3 at the start for her clear and damage. When clearing with Pele in the early game, you'll want to toggle the 3 twice. Try not to use the fuel up too much when rotating from camp to camp. If you want to use it for travel purposes, make sure you only toggle it once and not twice. Now let's get into the combos. With Pele, I suggest getting a Blink. The Blink relic works well with her combos, otherwise at times you don't have Blink, you'll have to walk to the enemies, hopefully bait out their escapes, and then proceed to use your 3 to chase and damage the enemy. Straight away engage with your 3, or in a rare case scenario, which I advise against unless you're tanky, your ultimate. Now with these combos, you want to follow up with your basic attacks, use your 3 when you can in fights. With all of these combos, you can use Blink if you have it up, or feel the need to. For short combos, 2 and 1. A combo to use if you don't have your 3 fueled up. For medium combos, 3, 2, 1. Or 2, 1, 3. Pele doesn't have many combos, this is why I find her a bit complicated. She's not as flexible with combos as some other gods. To make the most out of her kit, you'll have to use her 3 a lot. Now let's get into the builds. For the build guide, I'm going to go through a build for Pele as a jungler. If you would like a more in-depth guide, Dukesloth has made a super useful in-depth guide going through many different situational builds and much more. I really suggest watching his video if you're really serious about maining Pele. I generally build Pele as follows: Assassin's Blessing, Warrior's Tabi, Brawler's Beatstick if they have healers or Crusher, Soul Eater, Titan's Bane, Magi's Blessing, and Shifter's Shield. There are a lot of items that do work well with her. As I mentioned before, Dukesloth has made a very useful guide on that for her, but this is the build I generally build if I don't have many situational things going on. Like, if I'm blowing up because of their magical damage, I will tend to swap out Shifter's Shield for Bulwark of Hope. If I'm dying a lot in teamfights without escapes, I would go Mantle of Discord. Counters for Pele. Counters for Pele are guards of high mobility such as Susanoo or Socket because they can get out of her 2 really easily. Walls, crowd control, anything that blocks Pele because it takes away her engage since she has to walk in. This is why Magi's Blessing is such a good item on her. It counters at least some of the counters against her. And what not to do with Pele. This isn't really what not to do, but just be aware that if you're going to go into fights with her ultimate, make sure you can get out of there alive or have teammates around that can support you. Once you're in there, you'll rely on her 3 for either escaping or killing off the enemy. In this regard, it's hard in teamfights to just engage with her ultimate as enemies can kill Pele really quickly if she's a squishy assassin. Do not use her Amplified 3 to travel around, it uses up too much fuel. Instead, if you want to use her 3 to travel around, toggle it once only. And that is all for the Pele guide. I would like to take a moment to thank Borari and Jdo85 for their generous donations. As I'm currently not working and focusing on SMITE guides, any support is super appreciated. I have created a Ko-fi link where you can donate a helpful sum of $3 or more to help support myself while I'm focusing on YouTube. Any donations from you guys will be shouted out on my next video. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Feel free to subscribe and click the bell if you found this helpful. I'll be making one for every god. Any comments and likes would be super rad. I hope to see you for the next one. Bye!